Hey everybody, this is Mr. Grove here. Today we're going to talk about the positive and negative impacts of fungus kind of across the world throughout history. So we'll start with the bad. Fungus have played a really important role, negatively, sadly, throughout history. And we'll start with World War II jungle kind of scenarios. So fungus, as we know, are decomposers, and they decompose and break down organic things. Well, what kind of things are organic? That'd be materials for tents and for uniforms and socks and things like that. And so it posed a real problem in especially the South Pacific in World War II in that area of the world as far as fungus, jungle rot, and things like that. And so that's definitely one negative. Another negative that we'll kind of talk about is this right here. And so this is thrush. And so thrush is a parasitic fungus, and it is especially on infants a lot. And so a lot of times when a mom or a baby are on antibiotics, and they might, those antibiotics sometimes kill the good bacteria that will help keep the fungus in check. And so the fungus then will come upon the tongue in the baby's mouth, and it looks a lot worse than what it really is, but it can usually be treated pretty easily. But that's thrush, a type of fungus that can be parasitic as well. A really bad one is over here. So this is going to be white nose fungus, and this is a real problem for bats right now. Bats are really productive mammals. They eat a lot of insects that negatively harm humans, both physically and financially through agriculture. And so what this does, this fungus will wake the bats up out of hibernation early, and so there's no insects to eat, and the bats will basically starve to death then in winter. And it has really hit the bat population hard. I know locally the Illinois DNR and the Missouri Departments of Natural Resources are really trying to figure out what can we do to help combat this, and sadly we haven't made a lot of progress. Another negative is also in the warfare, with the Revolutionary War. Ships were made out of wood. The British had lots of ships. The U.S. didn't have as many, so it didn't impact us as much, and our ships were newer. And so when you have water and organic material, fungus can thrive. And so it's actually estimated that more ships were destroyed due to fungus than the actual American armies for the British in the Revolutionary War. Moldy fruit is another one that's a particular problem. There is a lot of fruit agricultural loss due to mold, due to fungus. I know at our own house we lose a lot of our peaches off of our peach tree every year, and we rarely get a crop if we don't treat that with a fungicide due to the fungal rot of the peaches. So you've lost it, I know, in your refrigerator before, and it's a lot of financial loss due to the fruit that gets molded due to the fungus. Trench foot is another one. So trench foot is kind of like athlete's foot, so it's a parasitic fungus. And this, again, kind of has a military type of thing. So a lot of times soldiers, when they're in a real wet, hot, humid environment, that promotes this trench foot. And so it's a real problem. If soldiers aren't feeling well, they don't fight well. And so that historically has caused a big issue. Jumping over to this side, we have Dutch elm disease, and this has been a really bad one. And so Dutch elm disease came over to the United States after World War I. It's a fungus, and it's basically wiped out the American elm and affects many, many species of elm. And so it kills the elm trees. And sadly, the American elm was a really solid tree, a good shade tree, and grew fast and strong. But it came over kind of after World War I on some European lumber, and again shows the importance of why we have to kind of monitor what comes in and out of the country, because sometimes it's not a disease. Sometimes it's more of a fungus that might affect us financially or agriculturally. This one here in the middle is smut. So we, in our garden, will oftentimes have some corn smut that grows on the ears. It doesn't really spread, which is good. It doesn't really affect you because nobody would be dumb enough to eat an ear of corn that looks gross like that. But it does affect that ear of corn, so you can't utilize that. This one here is ergots, and so this one's another particularly nasty little fungus. It has some hallucinogenic effect. It actually has the lysergic acid, which is partially used in the making of LSD, and it can cause a real problem. And way back in 944 AD in France, there was a ergots outbreak in their food where about 40,000 people died from that we have historical record of. And so it still shows up today, but we just have to monitor that, and if it does show up, then the field is treated. And then lastly, negatively, is the hallucinogenic mushrooms and the drug effects. So there's definitely negative aspects there that many people are not, do not understand what they're getting into, and then have a physiological effect and ultimately death. So those are some negative effects. Some of the good effects that we know of, we talked about morels, they're just yummy to eat. A lot of our antibiotics are made by fungus, especially the penicillin family. Our soy sauce is made by fungus. Many of our cheeses are going to be have their flavors due to types of fungus. We know from a bread, a yeast standpoint, that is, yeast is a fungus, and that's what is used to make our bread. And then one that you maybe didn't know was a lot of soft drinks, the citric acid is actually produced by a fungus process. Okay? And so that citric acid then that's used in the soda. So these are lots of positive aspects of fungus, so they're not all bad guys, but they have had an impact both historically and economically throughout the world. And I hope that was helpful.